right, Zig coming in at the top 10 of the show, we have Kevin Shields. Kevin is a multi-instrumentalist, and he played in the band Detention, as well as Big Thomas. Both bands were early adapters of musical movements in the New Jersey scene. Detention was one of the first 80s hardcore punk rock bands, and Big Thomas was one of New Jersey's first ska bands. Kevin played trumpet in Big Thomas and bass in Detention. We're here to talk a little bit more about Detention today because Left for Dead Records is re-releasing a mini album from their first single release and the other tracks that were to be put on like a full-length album. And they put it into one big package, and it's available now on all the streaming platforms. Also, if you go to leftfordeadrecords.com, you can get a sick vinyl. The release is titled Dead Rock and Rollers, and we were going to listen to the single Dead Rock and Rollers by the band Detention. Dig it. The song, Dead Rock and Rollers, the release, Dead Rock and Rollers, and the band Detention. You can get everything at leftfordeadrecords.com. Check it out. It's really cool. And this was a really cool glimpse into the 80s hardcore scene in New Jersey. No legends spared. Kevin tells some pretty wicked tales about what it was like to play with some of these bands. The Black Flag story was pretty sick. Anyway, this was a really informative conversation, and it really kind of highlighted that when there's a thing going on, you might want to check it out, right? Because he just kind of popped into it on both coasts, right? This is a really cool story. And Kevin points it out a lot. A lot of it had to do with luck and just being in the right place. And if you're looking, you're going to find it. Anyway, this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think you guys are as well. Before we get to it, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast at any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Kevin and sharing insight with you. So without further ado, this is my conversation with Kevin Shields. All right, cool. Well, kind of walk me through the musical background we were talking about a little bit ago. So how did you start with music?
I was a schoolboy musician at my elementary school. In grade 5, they offer music lessons, instrument of your choice. And, there was music at my house, and I must have had some interest in it, obviously. And as I recall, I told my mom and dad I might like to play the drums. And they had the chewing on aspirin face. You know that face?
Yes.
The who just farted face. And I guess that led to door number 2, and I picked the trumpet. I guess I was around 10 at the time, and I was bloody awful. And, but I had good teachers and a good school and a good instructor, and I took the thing home over Christmas break. That's what they called it back then, by the way, Dave, Christmas break. And I must have developed a callus on my lips. I actually started to get sounds and notes out of the thing, and that's really where it all started. I played that all through school. I did 1 year with a local drum and bugle corps playing soprano, which is just like a C trumpet, if you will. And I was in 2 military bands. I was a Coast Guard sailor, and I played with a training center band in Cape May, New Jersey, and then again in Governor's Island, New York. So I originally had a horn stuck to my face. That's how I got into the playing aspect of it. But I've always loved music, always.
That's incredible, because I talk with a lot of people that, that will start with the school instrument, will start with trumpet or saxophone and kind of give up on it and kind of find their way to the more rock related, like, musical outlet. So I guess I've talked to people who did that very same thing. They started as one thing and perhaps, went to another, where their interests lie. Yeah, and I partially think that is kind of because of the practice that comes with the academic approach to music. I think that kind of like shuns a lot of, or not shun, it becomes overwhelming, and but it seems like you, like how you described, you had a very good teacher. So can you kind of tell me a little bit of like what that looked like from like education to an Army playing, Coast Guard to playing in the military? How did that? Because I think I've really gotten to talk to anyone who has had that experience through lined. What's kind of like the similarities and differences?
Like they all kind of prepared me for each other. if you can kind of follow what I'm saying there.
Yeah.
That, I played in school, and, early on, by the time I'm in like, what they refer to as middle school now, we used to call it junior high school, I was in, you're giving concerts, you're in the symphonic band, you're giving a concert. I think when I was in 7th grade, they started a jazz band at my junior high school, and I was involved with it. And then, playing 4 years through high school, I was fortunate enough to make the wind ensemble, which is like an audition type thing, that's different from the symphonic band. But let's keep in mind that I was the perennial third chair. And you're a musician yourself. You know what a third chair is.
Yeah.
That is, I was deemed to be like the third best player. Because you know what? You are absolutely right. That, to move up a chair or to get better, that takes like time and effort and practice. I was a busy young man. You know what I mean? It's a busy world out there. I didn't mind it. I enjoyed every moment of it. But, maybe my work ethic was not quite what it could be. And then I did a year with a local drum and bugle corps, the Sacred Heart Crusaders, out of Manville, New Jersey. It was not school related at all. As you might guess by their title, they were sponsored by a local parish. And that was a little bit more paying attention to the look, the sound, the movement. This wasn't my high school marching band, which I participated in, was really not that hot. But with the Crusaders, there was a lot more attention to the movement and attention to detail. And I'm telling you, that saved my bacon when I finally made it to the Coast Guard bands, because you were really looked at in terms of your appearance, your movement, your playing. It was a lot more rigorous. So the 1 year I did with the drum and bugle corps absolutely helped me out when I got to the training center bands, because what happened to me is I did a gig when I was in Cape May, which is the training center there, the boot camp. And we did Friday graduation every week, because there was a class going out every week. And after one show, I was tapped on the shoulder by one of the drummers, who was permanent party. He wasn't a recruit. And he said, "Meet me outside in dungarees in 5 minutes, clown." So it was time for some additional instruction. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
But they all benefited each other, and they all contributed to various success in anything I had done. The discipline was kind of instilled in me. I guess maybe perhaps I couldn't get it from within. I couldn't do it myself, but I had great motivators. Let's put it that way. And I was so blessed. I had these instrumental teachers from 5th grade all the way through 12th grade. And with very few exceptions, they're highly influential on me.
It's incredible. And like, it definitely, I think this. And
I'm not trying to get on your good side here,
yeah.
Dave. I'm telling facts.
I know. I believe it. Discipline it's an interesting like phenomena, I think, like with just like growing up, because like I think the outside factors definitely play into someone being able to have that type of mindset and endure that type of discipline, and like just that kind of focus. It's a thing that grows with an individual, and I think a large product of that is because of the environment, and it is because of outside factors like encouraging that, because it's very easy, right, I believe, to become disencouraged, to be like, I got other stuff I can do. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
I agree. Why didn't I go to something else? I mean, I was a summer league swimmer, but music I did the whole time, year round. I was blessed for like 2 years. They had a summer music school, when I was in junior high, and they would have it at the, in the high school cafeteria for a couple hours a week, perhaps. And hey, man, my father was a public school teacher with a wife and 5 kids. There was not a lot of money rolling around the Shields household, believe me. And they ponied up so I could go to summer music school, and it was a blast. And it's a memory I'll cherish. The instructors and the teachers I had were nothing but encouraging and showing me the way, and it paid off. It paid off. I once sent a CD to my one of my high school band instructors who lived in Maine. I sent him a CD, and I just told him, I said, I had a little note in it. I said, you have more to do this than you can understand. If you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's incredible. What CD was it? What album was it? What project did you send him?
Bigger Thomas came out with a CD. It was, we had an LP. We have a 12-inch vinyl debut LP. But the CD I sent him was that album, and then we had some early demos that were never really released on, other than cassettes we would sell at shows. So this CD had pretty much all our early recorded stuff, and included a DVD of performances in New Brunswick and Trenton. So, it was a nice package, and I sent it to him, and he said that the local kids dug it. So, that's a thumbs up. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, that's awesome. So he was showing, yeah, that's incredible. This is a student of, that's so cool.
Hey, man, he deserved it. I mean, my junior high school teacher, my junior high school instructor, who was one of my main influences because he was into all different genres, took me to my first rock concert.
Yeah, what? Oh, that's
really took me to my first concert.
That's so cool. What was it?
He first took me when I was in 7th grade. They had a sign-up sheet in the band room. Don Ellis and his big band were going to be playing at Verona High School, and he had like a sign-up sheet. I don't know, he wanted to see what interest was, and I think I was the only guy who signed up. So after school one day, we went to his place nearby, and he let me pick out an album to play while he and his wife got ready, and I picked John Barleycorn Must Die by Traffic, and he dug it. And we drove to Verona High School, and I was floored because it was like it was complex, like big band music. This wasn't like Tommy Dorsey or stuff like that. This is the guy. He did. If you don't know Don Ellis, I don't blame anybody, but he did the music for the French Connection soundtrack. And he played an electric 4-valve trumpet. He wore a cape. He jumped around, and I had never seen such a thing. In the summer of '72, before I got to high school, he took me and 4 other of the band kids, and we went to Roosevelt Stadium in Jersey City to see Chicago, because that's where our interests lie. And they were, Five had just come out, and they were really booming, and so we went to see him in a crappy old minor league ballpark in Jersey City, which happened to put on a lot of shows. And for little 14-year-old Kevy, man, see kids wandering around with pot leaves on their jackets and drinking wine out of a bottle. It was pretty radical. I had not been exposed to something like that. Your first concert, you don't know what's going to happen. And it was just one of those milestones, one of those slightly life-changing events.
Well, it's especially coming from like kind of music in an academic setting, and you know what I mean, like to see it out of that kind of in the wild, see what with the completely different genre of it. It's such a wild experience, and you kind of it's an so with your takeaway with
it was like a field trip, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Except one that was really cool.
Yeah, super cool. And like an after school, but just like I guess so at that point, like having all this kind of experience with music in the particular setting of kind of like the academic route, like seeing these like out of like kind of school and out of the kind of like norm of that experience, what were some kind of takeaways you took away, like musically, of just how music could work or how it can be expressed?
I have 3 older brothers, and they were all music fans. And so, before I did, these albums, once we got a stereo, that was like, it was relegated to the kids. Once albums started coming into the house, that's influential there, because pre-internet and pre-instant information, what do you rely on? What are your friends listening to?
Right.
What are your family members listening to? Who's playing locally? Things like that. What's on the radio? Remember that? That's where you get stuff like that. But we would take the train from Somerville to Madison Square Garden to see who was ever there. We could get tickets, and it was like anthropological. It was like an excursion into for the, the high school, junior to train into the city, and I mean, the first time I walked in Madison Square Garden in 1974, I just came out like the walkway into the arena, and I looked around and I was like, holy sheep dip, again, I had not, what do I know? I hadn't even been to the circus or anything like that. And, we would do this as best we could, it's not an easy thing, you got to promise mom and dad you'll be home as soon as you can, but you go into the Madison Square Garden to see a rock concert, it opens your eyes. Plus when you go outside for a while and you see, the reality of New York City in the 70s, it brings you up pretty quick,
Okay, so from all these kind of like altering experiences, and then to join, like, to be in the military band, like, what led from that after that into like playing in the scene?
What happened was it really, I have a couple of things that, like, the great decisions of my life that sent me in one direction or another. And some are too personal to get into, but one of them was I enlisted in the Coast Guard when I was 17 years old, after I got out of 11th grade. Literally, Dave, my mom drove me to the recruiting office in Red Bank, and they wanted me, and I raised my right hand, and they said, come back in a year and have a high school diploma with you. So that's what I did. But what was crucial for me was you have to travel. You know what I mean? You have to travel. And I went in a number of different places, but something that was really, in terms of what happened later with me and, some decisions I started to make, was I was sent to school in Governor's Island, New York. It's a quick ferry ride from the tip of Manhattan. It's not a military base anymore, but I was sent there. And this was in like 77 and 78. And like new wave and punk had arrived. You know what I mean? So I would, I was living this existence that was very regimented, but, if you didn't have duty and, what they call it, as they call it, or you got liberty, as they call it, I'd get changed and I'd jump on the ferry and go to Manhattan. And so, figure out the time thing. You can go down to CBGB's, you can go to Max's. I did these things, some nights not so much. But I was exposed to music and really the lifestyle that went with it. This was beyond taking a bus to Madison Square Garden to see Jethro Tull. You know what I'm saying, man? I'm down on the Bowery, and there's guys with like pointy shoes and nose rings, bullshitting with the winos.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is no longer Jay Giles band. This is like, look at these people. Wow, look at that. Listen to them. You go to see like the Cramps or something, and it was like aliens had just beamed down, and there's me. Look, I was not a man of the world, but I had been exposed to stuff. This was my home turf, but I was very fortunate that this was happening at the time that I was there. So I would go and see these bands, and it really altered my perception of music, certainly its presentation, the way it looked, the way it sounded, what the attitude was. And this was way different, from going home on the weekends and my buddies are playing like George Thorogood and the Destroyers. You follow?
Yeah, of course. Well, to see anyone like completely twist the norm and not knowing what you're about to see, but being in it, is a whole different experience than kind of going into something George Thorogood, the Form,
exactly.
It's rocking.
Turn on your radio.
Right, exactly. But to completely witness something that was at the time so altering to the music that was going to be and the music that was already existing, to have this own blimp of like, if we're going back to the anthropological look, like to see this completely different like genre and culture of music and to be in it is like, live music is always more moving. You can get into someone who's doing something in front of you way more than the record, right? And when it's like something that's so alien and exciting, I totally follow you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it really, I thought, and I did at the time. I had wide-ranging musical tastes. My older brothers went to a bunch of different stuff. Some of it was pretty far out. There was some fusion in the household. You'd listen to, Chick Corea and Return to Forever, Weather Report, stuff like that. But when you hear the first Ramones album or the Suicide LP or something like that, it makes you rethink. And at the beginning, I was a visitor, but after a while, not so much a visitor. This had become. I saw some of these groups, and I thought to myself, "Yeah, you know what? No more Genesis at the Garden for me." You know what I'm saying? Can you imagine? Can you imagine? I mean, the groups at the time. You know, Considering what was going on and what we'll refer to as the mainstream, can you imagine how far out some of this stuff was? And at that point, I was looking for something like that. I was looking for something new, different. If it was just something that I already recognized to a point and it was just tweaked a little, it was for me.
And I also think, like, I guess once you kind of develop like this system and like of discipline for yourself, and you kind of get the routine, and you start to really grow in at least for a musical practice, and you start to really feel like you're understanding and grasping this thing. Like the people you start to look into are the ones that stretch the form and kind of break the discipline in a way to break the mold and kind of like have things that you wouldn't necessarily do, which excite that, so you can implement your own thing to it.
Yeah.
So at that time, so you're seeing the Cramps, you're seeing like the Ramones. Like what were some of the bands like I know the bands that were out at the time, but who were you like seeing?
I would. I had a neighbor, a neighbor friend of mine. One of my main guys from high school was going to NYU at the time. Now I don't know how that turned out. He's presently a music teacher in California, which is really just unbelievable because he used to give it to our teachers like he was a real problem child. Really, and look what happened.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, and we would get together sometimes because he lived there, and we would go to CB's and see these groups, and we didn't know, man. You know what? There was no reference point. We saw a group like the Invaders, and you never heard of them, and you never will. Check it out. Do they have any record that they left behind? I don't know. But me and Richard would sit there and we'd go, look at that guy. He's got a Rod Stewart haircut. You're grasping for these references, and
right.
You don't have them, so you're learning as you go. I saw a group called the Steel Tips, and I have to bring them up because they were the first New Jersey group to make, as far as I can tell, any kind of inroads into the New York City scene. I saw him at CBGB's, and the guy had a sleeveless denim jacket on, and on the back it said Steel Tips, Edison, New Jersey. And I said, what? There's a Jersey group? My interest was immediately piqued. And they had two people up front. Like, one was a young lady, and she was dressed in like a Catholic schoolgirl uniform, all right? This was before the Catholic girls. This was decades before Britney Spears videos, all right? And the other guy was like this big rotund dude with a suit on and with chomping on smoking a cigar, looking like Mr. Big. And the band started playing behind him. And this guy, as the song progressed, took off articles of clothing until the suit came off, and he was like in a sleeveless tee, cuffed jeans, and like engineer boots. You know what I mean? Like right in front of you, he did like this metamorphosis, and I go, okay, it was the presentation. It was like low level street art, but art nevertheless. I really, I said that's, was their music interesting to me? Well, sure, but it was the presentation, the audacity. And that immediately got my interest. But I saw all kinds of stuff. We go to Max's, and going to Max's Kansas City, and look, I'm dating myself here. Going to Max's, you would go there just to get a beer and listen to what was on their jukebox, man. You know what I mean? Like Wayne County, and
Yeah.
Ramones, and anything that was on a 7-inch, they had it. And so that was like, wow, it was like your own personal record player. Just, put some quarters in and away you go. It was great. It was great for a young man like that. But, that had to end, because, you're a military man, you get transferred. And that's another story yet, because then they sent me to California.
So, so when you go to California, do you find the similar, at least, are you looking for something along the lines of that type of experience? Or
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The first night I was in town, I went to the Mabuhay Gardens. I remember it was the Bags from L.A., Tattooed Vegetables, and I think Mary Monday played. I knew I must have read about the MAB, as they called it, in a magazine, or the papers out here at East. So, for the first and last time, I took the BART train. We were stationed in Alameda across in the East Bay. So I took the BART train over to San Francisco, and I was just kicking around town. And the first night I was there, I went to the Mabuhay and saw those three bands. And I was like, honey, I'm home. I went to a gig the next night at a different place and stayed out till like 5 o'clock in the morning. Oh, I was in heaven, man. I was in heaven. I was writing letters back to my siblings here, out east, and I was like, I think I'm going to like it here. Yeah, I arrived there in May of 1979. I was just short of my 21st birthday, and I was going across the way a couple nights a week. So it was almost like if they were coming through the Bay Area, I saw them. So I was witnessing the rise of what they would later refer to as hardcore.
Okay. So like the Dead Kennedys and like Black Flag and groups like that,
Yep.
Minutemen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Because DKs were, a local group, and some of the more motivated or popular groups would come up from the LA area: Germs, X, Bags, Black Flag, stuff like the Southern Cal groups would come up and play. And I mean, it was so long ago. I saw Black Flag once, and Des Cadena was up front, and I was like, wow, they got a new singer. That's how far back I go. It's like, it was like being in the record store back in the day and hear some little girl go, hey, did you know Paul McCartney was in a group before Wings?
That's so cool, though. That's so cool to be able to see that, though. Like, okay.
I was standing in front of the Go-Go's, and Belinda had orange hair. They would play songs like Johnny, Are You Queer, Fun with Ropes, stuff like that. Before they became successful and commercial. But you see that the down and dirty, genesis of it. Oh, it was beautiful, man. I got used to it quickly and really developed a taste for the more raucous and loud groups. Incidentally,
can you tell me about seeing the Germs?
I did not see the Germs.
Oh, okay. They would just come up. You were saying, gotcha.
Oh yeah. One of the there's a couple that I missed. X, the Germs, the Weirdos. That eats at me, but I saw so many groups. I went to gigs so much. I mean, you had to kind of pick and choose.
Right.
I was a sailor. I wasn't flush with cash, but, seeing how, entry into a club was probably $2 to see three bands or whatever. It's not some, I budgeted it, you know what I mean? In my, my entertainment budget. I remember going to see, at the MAB, Lydia Lunch was out from out east. And it might have been the DKs and like two other groups, and it was $4.50 at the door, and people were walking away and going to another club because it was $4.50.
Yeah. Oh wow.
You pays your money, you takes your choice, right?
Right. What an incredible lineup, though. Lydia Lunch and the Dead Kennedys. That's sick. Oh my God.
When you're doing it, you're kind of not thinking. It's like, I don't have duty on Wednesday night. I got a couple shekels, man. Let's go over to the MAB and see who's playing or whatever.
Wow, that's so, okay. So during this time,
yes, I was very fortunate. If you're a new music person, I was gifted. This was dropped in my lap, and I ran with it. So I don't want anybody to think that this is all of my doing. It just happened that way, and I'm very, very fortunate.
Well, it's interesting because, like I've read a lot about, different, John Doe has a really good book kind of about the LA punk scene where you get to see, have you read it?
I have not. I
you've
read,
lived it,
We Got
so
the
you don't.
Neutron Bomb.
Yeah. Okay. So like, I haven't read that one, but with the John Doe's book, like it's excerpts from everybody, and they just kind of tell their tale from their perspective of it, and it's interesting.
Yeah, right.
You always hear from like these guys, but you don't really get to hear from people that were just in it in a way, So to just kind of fall in here and be a part of this scene and just like be living in it, that's incredible. That's an incredible and I think stuff like that's happening everywhere, even now to a different degree. But it's just being out there and finding it. But
make no mistake, I was essentially the right guy in the right place at the right time.
Right.
You can almost trace it back to accident of birth, but that's the way it worked out for me.
And so, when and in this time, when do you decide you want to play bass?
When I was discharged, honorably, I'd like to point out, I moved back to New Jersey, and I was living with my mom and my dad. And the first job I had out of the service was at like a local tech place. I'll say it. I don't even know that they exist anymore. I had a gig with RCA Solid State nearby, and what jumped off was, it was a union shop, and they didn't get some of the contracts that they were hoping for, and it was time for some people to go. And as it works with a union shop, seniority rules, and I had just gotten there, so I saw what was going to happen here. So literally, if I'm not with my last paycheck, I went to a local music store, and for reasons unknown to anybody, me included, I bought a cheap bass. And the woman up the street from me, her son had played. He was out of state. He had been away. He was living elsewhere, and she had a bass amp which I purchased for not a lot. So I was set up. The only snag to that was I didn't know how to play it. It's kind of a drawback. You're a musician. You can relate to it. I didn't know a note on that thing, but I would invite my friends over and go, look. And I would open the case would be on the ground. I'd open it up. I go, look, I have a bass. And they're like, that's really impressive. You going to play something for us? I'm like, no. So there I was, but something in me had decided to make the shift, because at this point, man, it had been years I've been standing there looking up, been standing there looking at these people. All well and good. I had a great time. Again, very fortunate. But something in me said, well, if some of these folks can do it, why don't I give it a shot? And my brother Paul said, hey, how about Rodney, who was a high school classmate of ours? He plays guitar. He's pretty good, man. Get with him. And so I did. And my father's a speech therapist, and he had an office attached to the house so he could see students during the summer. And that bad boy was soundproofed, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You get in the picture yet? And me and Rodney would go in there with our amplifiers plug in, and we just started whacking them and stacking them. You know what I mean? He would show me stuff. Here's an A over here. Go here, 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 and we came up with riffs pretty quickly. And I said, this is pretty cool. It's the sense of power. This wasn't like doing the 1812 overture on your trumpet. With 20 other kids, you know what I mean? This was, 1, 2, 3, 4, kaboom, and we started coming up with stuff pretty quickly, and he seemed enthusiastic. So that was sort of the germination of the whole thing.
Well, and it definitely is a different experience when you're making your own thing. You know what I mean? It comes from, all that comes together from years of playing other people's things, and how you said, being a one of many in the ensemble, and but really taking it to your own and being this is something right. We have to say, and having a little team that develops, and you get this sense of us against the world in a way. So when did it become Detention? When did you get your brothers involved? Were you guys just like coming up with riffs and coming up with stuff, and like it started to like, we should make a band of this, or this is just fun. I'm starting to understand.
I mean,
the sense
essentially
of it.
to a point. It was completely organic. There was no heavy thinking about it beforehand or anything of that nature. Rodney was enthusiastic. He was happy to have someone to play with, no matter how amateurish. And it must have gotten the interest of Paul, who, who am I going to get? You know what I mean? I'm an amateur. I'm a total beginner. I've got Rodney here who was helping out and seemed enthusiastic. I was driving down the road with my brother in my car. I was driving, and the radio was on. It was kind of quiet, and Neil Young was on. And they're playing that song, Heart of Gold, right, by Neil Young. And old Neil is singing, and I'm getting old. And Paul reaches over and he clicks the radio off and he goes, "So's this song." And I was like, okay, I think I found somebody to be in my band, because he was exhibiting that Shields attitude,
Yeah.
And so eventually what he did was, my brother Daniel is a drummer, and a good one at that. He was living in Florida. So Paul took Dan's drum set and sat down there and started banging away. And so now it's Paul on drums, Rodney on guitar, Kevin on bass. We got ourselves a little combo going here. Yeah, and we did one gig. We were originally the Skid Marks. Yeah, I know, catchy, no? yeah, that's begging for. Oh yeah, that's begging for publicity right there. And we did as a trio with no vocals. We did a eviction party at my other brother's apartment.
All right.
Yeah, in the upstairs in the apartment, and we had like 7 to 9 like quote songs unquote. Again, all instrumentals. The most epic was probably about 2 minutes 15 seconds long, perhaps. And we got a couple of them in before the police department showed up and came on upstairs. And there had been a complaint. Yeah, no kidding. From the neighbors, and they stopped us from playing, but the party continued. So at that point, we knew we were on to something. When our first time playing in front of people.
You get shut down.
The local constabulary came by and said, "Be quiet." I said, "Okay, we're pointing in the right direction." What eventually happened was, Daniel was not my brother. Daniel, the drummer, was not. Things in Florida were maybe not going so hot, and we broke him down mentally and emotionally, and convinced him to move back to New Jersey and play drums in our fledgling punk rock band. And he did, and Hosanna, we now had a quartet, and someone who actually knew their instrument other than Rodney, and we were off to the races. And I want to point out our first gig, like paying gig in front of the public. This is not a house party. Our first paying gig in front of the public was at like a local disco type place where one of our friends had booked like new music night, which was very unheard of. And there was 3 bands. Praise God, we went on last because our set was kind of raucous. And our people were kind of unpredictable, and the management hated us. And at the end of the evening, the promoter gave us $100, which was unbelievable to begin with. And he said, "Here's $100." He goes, "By the way, you will never ever play here again." And I was like, "Yeah, no kidding." So, 2 up, 2 down. You're a baseball guy. Go Tribe. 2 up, 2 down. But, it got better after that. We still had some bumps in the road, but, this is the beginning of it. What's it supposed to lead to,
Right. Well, that's interesting, too. Cause so, like, at that point, were there vocals?
Yes.
Okay.
Like I have told people, without realizing how much we were mimicking Genesis, we kicked Paul out from the drums to up front, and yeah, I know. Yeah, there was no tambourine playing on his part, believe me. And he turned out to be an outstanding frontman who had the lung capacity to do what others could not do. And again, everybody had the enthusiasm. We started to roll and to get some songs together, and some were pretty good, and we started to attract notice. It just created more interest on our part. Can we make this better? What can we do? But with that quartet going on, things were available to us. It just worked out that way. And, I was blessed. I'll always be grateful that two of my bros were in this group. It was the best brother act since the middle class, so.
That I can't imagine like how cool that is to have that as a family, to be able to like to engage, because how cool it is when you're doing it and you're like, this is such a crazy experience, and when when the gig's like exciting, everyone's having a good time in the audience and in the band, and it's like one of those magic nights where everything's just working right, and you're just like, there's nothing cooler than this thing right now. This thing we came up with, people are getting into, and we're moved, they're moved, like, and then to be able to look at someone in your family and be able to be like,
right,
you know what I mean? Like,
right.
That's definitely something very, very special. And like,
it is.
I gotta imagine, like, just because like, as someone who's been in a band for a long time and has like, these people I started playing music with now are family, but like to have that from the rip, I can't imagine like how extra cool that is.
Yeah, I'm interested in the fact that you use the word magic, because I heard someone once said, and the phrase is very simple. I was watching a movie and somebody said, music is magic. And I agree with them. It's not like you're doing a trick per se, but you have this medium where you can move people somehow. That is magic.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, it's interesting too, because like, well, it's rhythmically, and like how all music works and how it affects our brain is incredible. And like, and it's definitely, it just, because it's such a personal thing that moves us, individual. Like, right. There's these things that totally like inspire you. And like, to know that you were slightly putting that out to someone else is like, I don't know. There's no words to describe it. So it continues to be like extra magic. Like,
I still feel that way. I haven't played music in years, and I will not be performing, in any respect that I can tell ever. It's not like it's out of my system, but it's no longer what I do anymore. But I'm still a fan. You know what I mean? Like last night, we finished a wonderful dinner, and I did the dishes, and my wife went into the next room, and laid down with her book, as she's wont to do. And I closed the door over, and I put on like Brownsville Station, and I was like leaping about the room, air guitaring and stuff, much to her amusement. And it makes my dog run away, Yeah. Oh, the poor thing. He doesn't know what's going on. I'm doing what we'll call interpretive dancing. You ever been to a Grateful Dead show?
I've never seen the Dead, but I've seen plenty of gigs
there's
with
a lot of interpretive dancing going on. Let's put it that way. So it frightens my dog, apparently.
I've seen plenty of interpreting dancing at other gigs for sure.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But
I'm still a fan,
Right.
I'll still do that, I'll put on, and I'll put a CD in. I'm a Luddite. I put a CD in and I start rocking out, man.
Hell yeah, man. So like, as Detention's going, right? You guys are like, are you like opening for bigger bands that are coming through? What's like kind of like okay, so who are you guys sharing bills with?
We're hitting the clubs like we were super fortunate because where we were from in Somerset County in New Jersey, there was like a scene developing that there was a band in the next town, and then there was a band in the next town over from that. So we could have our little DIY things and get people in bands there. There was an actual scene 20 minutes from New Brunswick. There's a number of clubs and bars that would have this kind of music on a regular basis. So, we had a platform, but we were also known, and you were kind of alluding to, we were the opening band's opening band, I'll call it, because if someone was coming through one of the bigger places, your City Gardens in Trenton, your Show Place in Dover, the touring bands would come through. The promoters would rely on us because A, they knew people would come to see us because we had a good following in New Jersey, and B, we would basically play for beer. So that's a promoter's dream. You
Yep.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he's got to give all the bread to the opener or whomever is coming from out of state. So he had, we were perfectly placed that we had enough name recognition and popularity, and basically, give us some gas money. So but what a wonderful position. That the promoters and the club owners liked us. It wasn't they liked us, so we were able to get stuff. Now look, this is original music in the 1980s, and I'm here to tell you there was really no money to be made. Let's be clear about that. So we would sell T-shirts and sweatshirts, and eventually we had a 7-inch single, as you're probably familiar, and eventually we had a 12-inch LP, as you're also probably already familiar. And we would sell these at shows, and that would give us the aforementioned gas money, the aforementioned beer money,
Right.
So we were happy campers, but, I got to see a lot of good shows, just because I was on the bill. How's that for a blessing?
Oh, that's the best feeling, to be like, okay, we're here, we're opening for Mike Watt. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, Dave, I was going to be there anyhow.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So if I have to hump my amplifier and my guitar in, it's not a lot of admission to pay for getting to do such a thing.
My group, we're personally kind of, we are experiencing the same, a lot of that that hits home, man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, playing for the chump change, but being on the sick bill because you want, because you want to be, and also but that in a way, everyone's like, yeah, you start opening for people, but that's a hard position to get into, right?
Right.
To be
because you have to win them over.
Right. You got to win the crowd over, and you got to win the venues over, and then you got to win the new venue guy over, who just you know what I mean? Like, it's an endless.
Well, if you can get some good word of mouth going, those guys talk to each other. So they talk to each other. So you can. It's not like you're climbing up a ladder. We were going to do what we were going to do, but you were so right in that if you're up there, and the vibration and the noise. And, maybe you're firing on all 8 cylinders that night and the crowd is into it and you can see it, there's nothing like it. That's, a real rush, a real satisfaction because it's something you created. I had somebody once who put it very well. I knew a girl and she was the singer of a cover band that played locally, a friend of mine, but she happened to sing for a local cover band. She goes, I'm not paid to sing. I'll do that for free. What they're paying me to do is to help load this crap in, break it down, and then, leave someplace at 2:00 in the morning. That's what they pay me for. And I get that. The performance is the thing. Do you agree?
I agree. Definitely agree with that. Yeah. That's the load into that, the promotion that goes before that, and all those the minor parts that another thing I heard that kind of builds off what you were saying. A friend of mine plays in a band in Austin, Texas. They have the whole 2% belief that 2% of what you do is actually playing the music, and everything else is the loading in, the loading out, the dealing with the drunks, the the promotion, the blah blah blah, making the flyer, the making the merch,
Right. Mm-hmm. And then doing it all over again.
So Okay, so who were some of the bands you guys were playing with though? What were some of the acts you got to open for? Do you recall?
Yeah, I mean, we played with American groups like Black Flag, Dead Kennedys, TSOL. Those are the California groups.
Right.
We also we opened up for GBH, one of the British speedcore groups, stuff like that. I have a list. I have a CD compilation from 20-something years ago where I listed in there who we played with, but that's just a smattering of it. But a lot of it maybe not who it was, and the bands I mentioned, I'm a fan of. So again, that's great to be able to do such a thing. Again, I was going to be there anyhow, but part of it is how was the experience itself. Now, you go to see the DKs, even at a decent-sized place at this time, it's going to be packed, it's going to be sweaty, you got to be ready for it, you know what I mean? But we opened up for Black Flag. It was Secret Side from New Jersey, Detention, Saccharine Trust from California, and Black Flag from California. This is obviously during the Henry Rollins era. And this gig took place at a New Jersey roller rink. All right.
Okay.
Where, like before sound check, before anybody came in, we were playing Frisbee inside. That, you know what I mean? That's how big it was. It was unbelievable. There was like 300 something people there, and the place looked empty because it was a roller rink. You know what I mean? But it's the general overall experience. It was a home game for us. For them, it was just they're on tour. But, it was, again, I'm going to go anyhow. And I went outside, and there's a line waiting to get in. I guess they had doors at a certain time. And because it was these other groups, and I'll take some credit for it, there's a line outside. And very gratifying. But a lot of it, how was the experience? Maybe you could play for, not every gig is that great. And maybe. We were very lucky. We really never had what I would refer to as a bad gig. The only thing that I was be concerned with is how is the crowd reaction? Enthusiasm, good. No reaction is the worst thing that a group like mine could face. Or lukewarm reception. You know what I mean? That was the worst thing that could happen. But we would work on it. Again, Paul was he was a great front man because he would say things to the crowd like, "Thank you, you're swell." And you see these like baldies out there like scratching their heads going, "We're swell." They didn't know where he was coming from. He would not goad them, but like confuse a cat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He would say these things and to show like, "Hey, we're goofballs. Here's another loud, hard, fast song for you. I hope you enjoy it." Boom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And eventually they get the idea. We're all friends here. Now you got them. You know what I mean? That's the gincher. Once you finally get them, what a feeling. You know what I mean? Other than me standing in front of my PV amp and my pant leg is flapping because it's so loud. You know what I mean? That's good too.
But yeah, well, that's super exciting when you win the crowd over. You know what I mean? Like it's awesome when they come ready, but also there's that little win of like by the end of the gig, like we're in this together. That's another
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree with that. You got to work a little harder.
So ultimately, like you guys record this one record, in the EP. What kind of brought end to, I guess, Detention?
I tried to describe it to someone else, and really what I come up with is we had a 7-inch single, which we're promoting now, the Dead Rock and Rollers single. And that, was limited pressing, was, X hundred copies. And that got us a lot of notice and gave us, the ability to get more shows, due to the notoriety of the damn thing. We put out an LP by ourselves and it did well and did the same thing. Got us good notice, better ability to get gigs. But, it was a long time ago when you're living it. And, I will admit to not being able to remember stuff, if you can forgive me for that. But say we were up and running by 1982, and we probably were wrapping it up 4 years later. And that's a long time for something that's just, a fun project, for some goofy suburban bros. That's a long time, man. And basically, as I described it to somebody, we had made our point. Whatever point we wished to make, and we had made our point, and we said what we wanted to say. And one of the worst things that anybody can do is start repeating themselves. You know what I mean? There's a difference between, the Ramones who toured for, 20 something years because that's how they made their living. You know what I mean? We had other stuff going on. But we had made our point, and it seemed like nobody was really that interested in booking gigs anymore. So it presented itself. It was pretty blatantly obvious. It was time to move on. You know what I mean? As sad as that was, I went on to other things, just because, my interest still lied in being up there. I didn't mind it. I enjoyed it, but it was time to move on. We had accomplished what we set out to, within our limited realm,
But I mean, I think that's a big thing too, is being all right with moving to the next thing. Like how you said, like when people start to repeat themselves, that also, that becomes a little, I guess, disgenuine, and like, I don't know, maybe striving for something that isn't at the same level it once was. But so when you pivot to your next project, the trumpet comes back, right?
Yes, eventually, yeah. And in the summer of '88, I was leaving one of the local establishments, and I saw a flyer on my way out. This is pre-internet, pre-all that. And there was a flyer that appeared to be recruiting players for what appeared to be a ska band. And I had recently remarked to somebody, I was renting a house with somebody, and we were sitting around watching the Reggae Sunsplash Festival, the thing they have down in Jamaica. And I was watching it on TV. It was like on PBS or some channel. And we're watching it, and I'm going, man, I should break out my trumpet. And the guy goes, yeah, you should. And a couple nights later, I'm walking out of this place, and I see this flyer. I took down the number, and I called like the next day. And it was two dudes, a guitarist and a bassist. They had been writing, and they were now at the point that they were looking for players. And I was like the first guy to respond. And I tell this guy, they go, so what instrument do you play? I go, trumpet. And they go, really? Like it was some big thing. I was like, well, Now let's keep in mind they had not touched the thing in years. I still owned one, but I had not touched the thing in years. But that's where that came out. And these two dudes had been writing, and they had some good ass songs. And we got together, and it was crude bashing and crude bleeding on my part. But there seemed like some promise there, and other people started to respond. And it was like a pile-on. People started to respond, and we got, and it's like kismet, brother. And I'm not telling you anything, because you already know. If you have the right people, that you have to have the right people. Right. You know what I mean? You're going to be an ensemble player. Everybody has to be on the same page, and eventually, have their eye on the same prize. You know what I mean? So we were very fortunate, because this thing eventually turned into like a 7-piece. And to get people who have the same mind, that many people are of the same mind and are with the program, that's just dumb luck. But again, as it was with Detention, that's just the way it shook out. There's no explaining it. Kismet, I call it. My wife tells me that's a proper word to use. And that group eventually became Bigger Thomas. We were extremely fortunate, because we were New Brunswick based. You got Rutgers University right there. The clubs I was telling you about, that this place was a cultural capital in its own little scuzzy way, in its all, small New Jersey City way. But they had the university there. So this is fertile grounds, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Hey, okay, so with that experience of kind of like, being one of many in this, kind of going back to almost like it almost seems like the best of both worlds, right? It has the punk aesthetic of doing it, us against the world, with our message and our sound, but also
very street level.
Yeah. Very
street level.
And also coming from like the kind of like background of being in an ensemble, right, and knowing how to navigate that water. Like, so was that experience kind of like for you, was it kind of like the best of both worlds in that sense?
Yeah, all I did was, well, first, I had to, brush up, and we practiced like fiends, and we started playing out pretty soon and pretty frequently. So, first off, you as a musician know, if you sit in your room and you woodshed, that's all well and good, but you really become much better when you're playing with other people. So, we came up, but the best of both worlds. Hey, man, it was great. I basically changed my clothes and my instrument, and I was almost ready to go. You know what I mean? So I changed my clothes and I changed my instrument, and these people would come up to me at the early shows that knew me from before, and they would come up to me incredulous, and they'd go, I didn't know you played trumpet. And I was like, well, you didn't know me when I was in fifth grade. What can I tell you?
Yeah. And like, oh, that's so like, that's the beauty of being able to like take the music, like, and just apply the technique. You know what I mean? Which is,
how's that for a boomerang? You know
right,
what I mean?
Right. Oh man, that's so cool, man. Kevin.
Yeah. Last time I had touched a thing, I was in uniform, with a short haircut,
Also, that had also be like an interesting experience, like going into like some of these punk clubs with the short haircut. I'm sure you're fitting in. Like,
yeah. But it's. I'm not saying that there was a revival at the time. This was years after like the British, revival of the Selector, the British two-tone groups. This was 1988, so that had come and gone already. But to have something like that in America was, in fact, new. And, Bigger Thomas is widely seen as basically the first New Jersey ska band. Now, that being said, we had good writers and good players, and, we evolved and branched out, that we would do stuff that was Latinish, world beat, reggae-type stuff, pop rock even, pop rock that happened to have a horn section. I'm not saying... I'm not saying we were blood, sweat, and tears. We were not, but we could do a lot of different things because people had wide-ranging interests. So we started as a ska band and really kind of morphed into something different, which doesn't bother me. Ska is, it is what it is. I love it as a sound, but if you're into a genre, now you're kind of limited. Do you agree?
I definitely agree with that. And I always find myself interested in the bands that kind of morph from genre to genre anyway, because you're getting like them and what they think of, how they would say reggae or how they would say ska, you know what I mean, or jazz. You're really getting that artist's like kind of interpretation of that. And I find it really fascinating now that we've talked about, like, kind of going from the first rock band you saw, Chicago, which was a pretty horn, kind of bass group, to like to this group. You know what I mean? Like, that's a pretty fascinating journey by itself.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. Again, the right guy in the right place at the right time. Why did I take the number down and call? Because I had not been in a band for a while, and I was a little restless. And I thought, do I have more creativity in me? I think I do. And again, it just worked out that way. If there's a scientific phrase for dumb luck, I'd be interested to hear it, because that's kind of what we're relying on there,
It's incredible. Like, it's an incredible amount of just your story so far has been just an incredible amount of just being in that luck, that's all it is. That magic, that luck, whatever it is, it's been working.
What would have had I been born 10 years earlier or 10 years later? Would something similar happened? Different times, different places, different happenstances. But you got to wonder. It was just. Again, I call it the accident of birth, but I was there, and that's what was happening. It just happened. I jumped in. These cats I grew up with. They didn't follow me all over. I was, you had to learn to be kind of a loner if you wanted to go see some of these shows and hang out with these people and stuff like that. You couldn't wait for the approval of your peer group. You just had to go.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and that's a real strong sense of just person. What's the word I'm looking for? That's a strong sense of self, because I do that a lot too. I go to shows by myself a lot, and like sometimes I almost prefer it, because then you can just like meet people in front of you and just kind of like, you know what I mean, like there's no obligation of showing up at the same time or doing whatever. It's real be in the moment. But I guess I have one more question. I really appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I've loved hearing your story, and like the record, it's fantastic. This re-release, I guess. So what's your, like, hearing this music being put out again? How has that experience been for you?
It's it's very gratifying, of course. That Detention was this do-it-yourself, really came out of nowhere, completely organic. There was no putting ads in the newspaper or the music magazine. There was none of that. It just sprouted. You know what I mean? It was like a bird came along and dropped a seed and something grew there. But it's very gratifying. What really is one of the most remarkable things about it is that at the time we were just doing it. We weren't going, oh, we're going to do this and this will cement our legacy, or we've got to do this, that, or the other thing. We were just rehearsing, playing gigs, having fun, and not thinking really, about any kind of future, because, we didn't do that as a living. So once it was over, it was over. So, when people get the 12-inch, they're getting something that was, it was unplanned. If we had thought back in the day that, 40 years down the road, people are going to be interested in this, we'd have been like, get out of here, go get us beer, you're just living it. You're not thinking about that. But I understand it, because now the way media is presently, it's like nothing ever dies. There's an internet now, right? Like nothing ever dies. If you, Dave, want to go online and hear some obscure, garage band, from Cleveland circa 1966, you can find something. This can all be done. So we're in this new media age, and this is just like an outcropping of it, that there is literally a market for this. Hey man, if I had been playing bass with Detention, we were listening to music from 40 years before that, that would be like Glenn Miller and shit. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's fascinating to me in a way culturally that people would listen to this now, because let's face it, these things don't die. Disco is dead. No, disco is not dead. It's changed its sound and its look a little bit, but it's still out there. They may call it EDM. They may call it house, whatever. Punk is dead. No. It may have changed its look a little bit. Maybe it's, maybe it can't be seen or heard in as many places as it was at one time, but it's not dead. It's still here. If we can swing it, one of the local record stores is having a gig this coming Thursday night, with like 4 bands, punk rock, and, I get home from work late, but if we can get over there, I'm going to find out what time it starts. If we can get over there, I'm going to go see it just to see what's up now. You know what I mean? And yeah, just not, there's not, where we live, it's not a lot of cultural stuff going on. So this is really a rare occasion. So I may go over and check it out if it's, if I can swing it time wise, but, to get this thing in my hand, it's really something. We thought we had something good at the time, and this is almost like kind of a validation that, yeah, this is, there's value to this. People are interested in stuff like this. And that's really, really gratifying. My only sadness is that my brother Paul is not here to witness it, because he would have loved this. He would have loved this. And that's my only real sadness, for him to see this, it would just tickle him so much. And so really there's a bittersweet aspect to it, but quite honestly, I'm proud. You know what? And you go buy this reissue and you listen to Dead Rock and Rollers and you listen to like the other 8 songs. And I'll tell you right now, I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we did it. It was what we could do at the time with the resources and the creativity we had, but I'm glad we did it. I hope people like it, but it's my statement. You can embrace it or you can reject it. It's already a done deal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's a beautiful record. I think it's got that energy. I think it's got that that when you go to that punk show, I think you're going to find remnants or echoes of that energy there. If you can make it to that,
Yeah.
and I think I'm sorry to hear about your brother's passing, but I think that's a beautiful monument to know that his voice is out there,
Right.
helping
Right.
that echo.
Sometimes I listen to our music. I'm by myself just because I want to hear his voice, and other times I can't listen to it for the same reason. You know what I mean? That's the way it is. That's the way it'll always be. But it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to go and see some young kids just throwing down, whether they're really accomplished or they've really got it together. Just people getting up there and letting it fly. That excites me still. You know what I mean? And for good reason.
Yeah. Well, Kevin, I hope you do. I hope you make it to that gig, and I hope everyone else picks up this release and is into it as I am. And man, I really appreciate your time. This has been a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, and best to you.
All right, Kevin.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig of the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.